Good evening, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 31st October 2024, and in this session we have some important articles from different newspapers. So we'll try to discuss all those important news articles in a very detailed manner, and through this discussion you will get an overall idea of most important current events which are covered in different newspapers, and this discussion and this session will certainly help you further enrich, add value to your preparation. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion. And in previous class I have given one prelims practice question, and remember that I also told you that this initiative, which is the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, so we have discussed several times about this initiative in our classes. So the initiative on critical and emerging technologies that aims at co-producing jet engines, long-range artillery and infantry vehicles is between India and which of the following countries? So the correct answer for this question is United States, right? So option B is the correct answer for this question. So with United States of America, we have the initiative on critical and emerging technologies. So this initiative will span across different areas: space, defense and all other important areas. So India as a developing country, such initiatives will certainly benefit it to achieve the scientific advancement, the level of scientific advancement that is important for India to grow at a faster pace, address its socio-economic disadvantages or socio-economic challenges, right? So as I've already told you that the initiative on critical and emerging technologies is an initiative between India and United States. And in fact, these two countries, we all knew that the powerhouse of tech ecosystems, and they are coming together, they are uniting for the collective future. And in fact, the initiative on critical and emerging technologies is an agreement, or it is a groundbreaking agreement to further broaden or to further widen India-US collaboration in a new technological advancement. So when we discuss about the initiative on critical and emerging technologies, don't forget that this is an initiative between India and United States. So today we have one more important new prelims practice question. The question is, which of the following articles of the Constitution of India requires the Prime Minister of India to furnish information related to decisions of the Council of Ministers to the President of India? So I hope you have understood this. The Council of Ministers are being appointed by the President on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. So therefore, Prime Minister is usually an intermediary or a link between the President and the Council of Ministers, and there is a constitutional article that requires the Prime Minister of India to furnish information related to the decisions taken by the Council of Ministers to the President. So please identify that article and also answer this question in the comment section, and the correct answer will be providing you in tomorrow's class. And the first article with which we are going to start this discussion is with the recognizing the economic value of unpaid work. Now, what is unpaid work? Generally, women perform the unpaid work at the in households, right? So for example, child care is an unpaid work. The household chores, they are also an unpaid work. So it is important to recognize the economic value of the unpaid work. Now, what is the context? In this particular context, this article is given in the Hindu newspaper. The context is that how valuing women's unpaid contributions can reshape our understanding of economic productivity, right? So because as of now, when we are calculating our GDP, so when we are calculating national income or per capita incomes, So it is very often excluding the economic value of unpaid work performed by the woman. So therefore it is very important to understand or to recognize the economic value of the unpaid work in order to understand the economic productivity, as well as we have to foster policies. Those policies certainly needs to address the existing inequalities, and also there is a need to promote redistribution of gendered unpaid labor as well. So in this context, so we'll try to understand, so what are the shortcomings in recognizing the economic value of unpaid work, and what are the existing challenges, what are the shortcomings, and what are the benefits and advantages of recognizing the economic value of unpaid work. So we are going to discuss this in a very comprehensive and a very detailed manner. And in fact, what does it mean when we say unpaid work performed by women or other category of people? So generally, so unpaid work may be a care work. For example, in a family, they may be elderly, they may be children, and women used to attend those elderly. So unpaid care work is part of the unpaid work performed by women. And even parenting is also an unpaid work, and domestic responsibilities performed by women. So all these things are categorized as part of the unpaid work performed by women. So therefore there is a need to recognize the economic value of unpaid work, and that is the new debate which has been emerging, and that has been centered around the unpaid work. And in fact, the debate or the dialogue between different sections about this unpaid work has been emphasizing on the need to recognize, and also there is a need to attach a certain sum of value or the contributions for this unpaid work, right? So we need to recognize and we need to understand the monetary worth of this unpaid work, and that is very, very important, right? Because women also perform a lot of duties, a lot of work they usually done, but most of this work is either unrecognized or unpaid, right? And in fact, India's first national time use survey, okay, so national first time use survey, that was released in the year 2020. So this survey was released by National Statistical Office, and the first national time use survey finds out that 81.2% of all women are engaged in this unpaid work. So remember that I have already told you that women perform this unpaid work. So however, along with women, some other group of people may also perform unpaid work. Maybe male members of a family also perform an unpaid work. But if you look at some data about this unpaid work, so around 81.2% of all who perform this unpaid work are women alone, right? So compared to just 26.1% of men. So you can imagine that there is a huge quantum of women performing this unpaid work. So don't you think that there is a need to recognize the economic value of unpaid work performed by the woman? And in fact, this unpaid work is, of course, without a doubt, is a double burden on women, right? So what is a double burden on women? So when I say double burden, imagine that women are they are doing some work somewhere else, and after completion of their work they have to come back to their home and they need to perform this household work. So don't you think that this is a double burden on women? So this is not a double burden, but a very higher level of burden on women. because Indian women on an average spend 36 hours per week 36 hours per week on unpaid domestic work compared to just 16 hours, so less than half of what women perform. So less than, right? So 16 hours per week, this is performed by men and this is performed by women. So don't you think that there is a very high burden of household work on women? And in fact, the unpaid work is a very important and a major contributor to economy, which is often neglected, which is often not recognized, right? So in fact, if we talk about the contribution of unpaid work to the Indian economy, so it contributes approximately rupees 22.7 lakh crore. And if we talk about this in terms of its contribution to GDP, it would be around 7.5% of India's GDP. So there is a huge contribution of unpaid work to the Indian economy, but it is really unfortunate that this unpaid work and its economic value is not recognized. So that would create a lot of problems for the woman in the longer term. And in fact, there is also a labor force gap, because women labor force participation in India is very low. It is abysmally low. And in fact, women who are not part of this labor force usually spend over 7 hours daily on this unpaid work, so thereby limiting their overall ability to participate in paid employment. So when most of the women are engaging in this unpaid care work in their respective families, so how do you think that they can go out and they can work as part of this paid employment? So because of that reason, the female labor force participation is also abysmally low in India. So that has to be worked out. So however, so when we make a solid comparisons between with the global trends of the female labor force participation and unpaid work which is being performed across different parts of the world, so unpaid work nearly accounts between 10% to 60% of the GDP worldwide. So in fact, the unpaid work varies significantly across different countries, because there are differences in terms of development, right? So there are differences in terms of the gender inequality or gender perceptions, and because of that reason, so the unpaid work is also significantly varies across different countries. When we talk about this, when we put this into perspective or an example, the APEC countries, so Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation countries, so they estimate unpaid work at 9% of their respective GDPs. In Australia, it represents 41.3%, while it is only 5.5% in Thailand, right? So apart from that, sustainable development goals, we have been discussing about the sustainable development goals time and again. United Nations has launched the sustainable development goals. So there are 17 sustainable development goals. So when we talk about this 17 sustainable development goals, so one of the goal which is talking about gender equality, sustainable development goal number 5 talks about the gender equality. So when we recognize the economic value of the unpaid work, right? So I've told you that it talks about gender equality, right? So since it talks about gender equality, now what is the core concern of this article? The core concern of this article is recognizing the economic value, of unpaid work. So what happens if we recognize the economic value of this unpaid work? So don't you think that it aligns with the sustainable development goal number 5, that is gender equality? So therefore, recognizing unpaid work aligns with sustainable development goal number 5, which promotes gender equality and values the unpaid work as well as the domestic work. So therefore, there is a need to recognize the unpaid work. However, it is not free from the consequences. There are certain consequences of this unpaid work. Now, what are those consequences? We'll try to understand this in a detailed manner. The consequences include disproportionate unpaid work for women, so that would perpetuate the gender disparities. Okay, so when women are regularly performing this unpaid work which is not recognized, which has no economic value as of now. For example, when women are primarily engaged in this unpaid work, because of this reason they are not being part of the formal employment or paid employment, so that would perpetuate the gender disparity. And in fact, we very often want that woman needs to be financially independent, woman empowerment. So few things which are part of a woman empowerment is self-reliance of woman, financial independence of the woman. So therefore, this factor, the unpaid work, would restrict women financial independence as well as their professional growth. How professional growth? Because they can never be part of the paid work. So if they continues to engage or if they continues to work most of the hours on this unpaid labor work, and in fact, so GDP, gross domestic product, which is the sum of all the goods and services produced in a country in one financial year. So this unpaid care work is not a part of the GDP calculation, right? So it is excluded from the GDP. So thereby it undervalues the substantial economic contributions that are being made by the unpaid labor work. And thirdly, the unpaid workload limits women's entry into the formal labor market, because for example, imagine that women can work for 12 hours and on an average 7 hours women are spending their time on this unpaid labor work in their respective families. But because a majority number of hours are being spent on this unpaid labor work, it certainly restricts women's participation in the formal labor market, thereby reducing the female labor force participation in India, both rural and urban areas, and that would also substantially impact the economic growth as well as economic development. And apart from that, it also impacts women's financial independence or self-sufficiency. And in fact, the burden of the unpaid work can also lead to stress, burnout, and even negative health outcomes for the disproportionately responsible for it. And in fact, without any quantification of this unpaid work, and it remains unaddressed in policy making and leaving a significant economic and social issues which are associated with this unpaid labor work unresolved. For example, when I say the significant economic and social issues, domestic violence, mental stress, lack of financial independence, lack of decision making power on the part of the woman, and low female labor force participation. So don't you think all these are part of the socio-economic issues? So when we start quantification of this unpaid labor work, so there is a possibility that we could address all these socio-economic issues since we are quantifying this unpaid labor work. And what should be the suggestions to make sure that this unpaid labor work is quantified, and there are adequate policies, there are adequate frameworks which are in place to quantify this unpaid labor work. So in order to do so, there is a need to develop frameworks, and whatever frameworks that the government develop, they must recognize and even account for this unpaid work in national economic indicators, and thereby we need to recognize the economic value of this unpaid labor work. Unpaid labor work must be recognized, and in fact there is also a need to encourage shared domestic responsibilities to address certain disparities, supported by public awareness, even educational initiatives as well, and conduct frequent and comprehensive time use surveys to obtain accurate data on unpaid labor, and also support evidence-based policy making. So policy making should always data driven as well as evidence-based policy making, right? So evidence-based policy making and data-driven policy making, so they are very important to address the socio-economic issues or to resolve those issues which are still prevalent in the female labor force participation, or even quantification of the unpaid labor work, which is very important for a country like India. And apart from that, there is also a need to introduce affordable child care and elder care and family support services. So all these things would further ease unpaid workload on the primary caregivers, mostly who are women. And apart from that, there is also a need to consider direct and indirect support such as tax credits, social security benefits, and social security benefits for the primary caregivers to offset the unpaid work contributions. There is also a need to further extend the incentives for the primary caregivers, and that would help offsetting the work contributions of the primary caregivers or people who are engaged in the unpaid care work. So the next important article is about tackling the issue of adjournments as well as case pendency, right? So this is in the context of increasing pendency. Increasing pendency of cases in Indian judiciary. So secondly, it also centers around increased vacancies. Increased vacancies in higher judiciaries and increased pendency or increasing pendency into the Indian judiciary. So the context is that President Draupadi Murmu has called for an end to the court delays, right? So in recent times there is a huge pendency of cases, and even court delays are also plaguing Indian judiciary. So you may have come across the term which is justice delayed is justice denied. So therefore in Indian judiciary it becomes a very common phenomena that the case pendency is very high, and there are also huge number of vacancies across different courts in India. And in the district judiciary conference, President Draupadi Murmu said that a frequent postponements makes it hard for the poor and rural people to seek justice, because as they worry cases will take too long to resolve. Okay, so when it takes a lot of time to dispense justice or resolve cases, of course there is a high probability that the people will lose their trust and confidence over the higher judiciary. So at this point of time, the judiciary cannot lose the trust and confidence of the common people. And what are the primary cause of case pendency and frequent adjournments in the Indian judiciary? Now firstly, we need to look into the judge population ratio. So in India, we have a low judge to population ratio with only 21 judges per million population, right? So for 10 lakh people, there are only 21 judges as of 2024. So don't you think that this low judge to population ratio will also impact the dispensation of justice or delivery of justice by the judiciary? And in fact, this number is far below than the law commission recommended 50 per million judges, right? So law commission has recommended that there should be at least or minimum 50 judges for 1 million population, but as of now we have only 21 judges for million population. And in fact, there is also a delay in filling judicial vacancies, and that further leads to understaffed courts. So these courts are also very often understaffed. So there is a procedure called memorandum of procedure, and in fact this memorandum of procedure, and in fact the disagreement between the judiciary and the central government is also another area which leads to delaying in filling vacancies. So that leads to understaffed courts, because high courts have a 30% vacancies as of now, and that further adds to the pressure of more pressure on the existing judges as well. And in fact, judges very often handle multiple courts, right? So courts are understaffed, and there are huge vacancies, around 30% vacancies in the high courts, and judge population ratio is very low in India. So, and because of this reason, judges often handle multiple courts or specialized responsibilities that they need to undertake, and that would lead to distracting these judges their ability to focus on primary cases, and this would further adds to more and more delays. And in fact, the courts are further burdened by multiple types of cases, including civil cases, criminal cases, constitutional cases, and appeals from one court to another court. So all these things which end up in higher courts, these are the factors which have been leading to the severe backlogs. In recent times, the public interest litigations are being filed in the Supreme Court and High Court. So all these factors have been increasing the burden on the judiciary. So apart from that, there are special courts, fast track courts, and tribunals. So these are being created to reduce the burden on the judiciary, so that the case pendency can be further reduced. So however, these measures have not been giving a good amount of results because of all these existing challenges. So you can see that the Supreme Court's sanctioned strength is 31. So I think this is a bit outdated or old data, and in fact in Supreme Court there's backlog of around 60,000 cases. In High Court there's a backlog of around 38 lakh cases, and in lower judiciary, district and sub courts, there's a backlog of 2 crore 30 lakh 79,723 cases are pending. And in fact, these are the vacancies: 464 vacancies in high courts and 4,166 vacancies in district and sub courts, right? So you can also see the data of judges per million population, with France having the highest number of judges for 1 million population, followed by USA, Australia, and Canada, England, and India, right? So these are some details with respect to the pendency of cases as well as the vacancies across different courts. And we need to leverage the technology to reduce the pendency of the cases and also overcome the judicial vacancies as well. Now, how can we use our technology to reduce the pendency of cases? So first and foremost, we should look into the digitization of the case records. So that is very important. So that means paperless courts, right? So digitization of court records, as these electronic records would reduce the administrative delays in case filing, retrieval of data, retrieval of information or these records, and also transfers between different courts. And artificial intelligence powered case management system would further assist in case prioritization, and it would also help in regularly tracking the progress of the cases and also predict possible delays, so thereby enabling judges and clerks to streamline schedules more effectively. That will help in quick delivery of justice, as well as reducing the case pendency over a period of time. So virtual hearings can also expedite proceedings, especially for remote cases or for minor disputes, saving travel as well as the scheduling time as well. So therefore we can say that technology has a lot of spin-off benefits, or it has a lot of benefits in terms of reducing the case load. And there are certain reforms which are necessary to improve judicial efficiency and also to reduce the backlog of cases. Now, what are the reforms which are necessary to improve judicial efficiency? Right, so quick action on filing these judicial vacancies is critical, right? So whenever so we have understood that there are around 30% of the vacancies in the high courts, 30% of the vacancies in high courts. So these vacancies needs to be filled as quickly as possible. So filling vacancies would certainly help in reducing the pendency of cases. So apart from that, the center has created National Judicial Appointments Commission through 99th Constitutional Amendment Act, but later the Supreme Court has held that this 99th Constitutional Amendment Act is unconstitutional because it violates the judicial independence. So therefore there is a need to increase sanctioned positions, and there is also a need to fill the existing vacancies in the judiciary, and at the same time there is also need to create such an institutional mechanism to make the judicial vacancies or to fill these judicial vacancies as quickly as possible. So that will help in reducing the caseload substantially. And in fact there was a committee which is Justice Jagannath Committee. So this Justice Jagannath Committee has recommended for pre-legislative impact assessment. So this pre-legislative impact assessment needs to be done, so that would ensure adequate resources accompany new laws as well, right? So this recommendation needs to be looked into. And secondly, there is also a need for a scaling up or increasing alternative dispute resolution. So what are the mechanisms which are part of this alternative dispute resolution? For example, Lok Adalat, right? Arbitration, mediation, right? So all these things are being part of the alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So therefore there is a need to scale up or increase the mediation centers, incentivizing the alternative dispute resolution methods, because they can resolve disputes outside the courts, thereby decreasing burden on the overall judiciary as well. And there is also need to establish a well-staffed, well-functioned and specialized courts for specific categories, for example economic offenses, family disputes. So that would help reduce burden on the judiciary, right? So burden on judiciary, and these tribunals need to have for example there are tribunals as a quasi-judicial bodies were established. So there are certain vacancies in these tribunals as well. So vacancies in tribunals needs to be fulfilled, and apart from that there are some special courts as well as fast track courts for specific cases such as economic offenses, family disputes and even POCSO matters. So all these matters have to be resolved, and there is a need to dispense justice as early as possible, right? So apart from that, these vacancies needs to be filled, and the trust and confidence of the people on the higher judiciary needs to be further enhanced. And next article is that Environment Ministry may hike penalty for the stubble burning. Now what is the stubble burning? We'll try to understand this stubble burning, right? So there are two cropping seasons. One is Kharif and second cropping season is Rabi, right? So in fact, in states like Punjab, Haryana, so first farmers cultivate rice and second farmers cultivate wheat, right? So wheat is a winter crop, we all knew about that. So it is a winter crop, wheat is a winter crop, or it is a Rabi crop. So after harvesting the rice, after harvesting this Kharif crop, so farmers hardly left a very less time to sow wheat in their respective fields. So it would be very difficult for them to clear the remaining stubble from the field after harvesting. So one way to quickly remove the stubble, the leftover stubble in the field, is to burn the stubble, right? By just burning the stubble, they would just clear the leftover stubble in 1 or 2 days, and they immediately start sowing wheat, because it would take a lot of time clearing all the stubble out of the field, and it would also not financially or economically viable for the farmers to take out all the leftover stubble to take out from the field to take to some other place. So because of this particular reason, farmers just burn the stubble in their respective fields. So however, since this is being done during the winter times, the wind movement is not there's no proper wind movement at that point of time, and in fact this adds to more pollution in Delhi, right? So stubble burning is one of the major factor of pollution in Delhi, right? So during winter times we experience a lot of pollution in Delhi. It is because of the stubble burning, and in fact the stubble is being burnt in Punjab, Haryana and Rajasthan and even western UP. So it is very important to control stubble burning to reduce levels of pollution in Delhi. So therefore the central government and the respective state governments have been taking various measures to control stubble burning, right? So Environment Ministry may hike penalty for stubble burning, right? So there will be a penalty on the farmers if they burn the stubble. So I hope you have understood this background. Now Environment Ministry is deliberating on plans to increase environmental compensation, which is also known as the penalty, which is to be imposed on farmers for burning paddy straw, and it may revise the existing rules which empower the Commission for Air Quality Management to impose such fines as well, so on the farmers who burn this stubble. So firstly, we'll understand what are the major reasons for stubble burning in India. There are certain reasons for stubble burning. So one is the traditional agricultural practices such as the rice wheat cropping pattern. I have explained this through the Kharif crop and Rabi crop, the rice wheat cropping pattern. Secondly, the time gap between the harvesting of rice and sowing of wheat is also particularly limited. There is a less time, and it is a cost-effective method. So the cost-effective method means burning eliminates the need for expensive machinery, right? So there is no need to carry out the stubble from the field to some other place, right? So burning the stubble within the field is a cost-effective method. And there are also lack of effective alternatives or viable alternatives right? So there's lack of access to affordable and efficient machinery for stubble management, and in fact subsidies and incentives are also lacking on certain farm machinery for adapting alternative practices, and there is also lack of awareness on the part of the farmers as well. So all these factors are considered as major reasons for stubble burning in India, right? So in fact, the government's proposal to increase the penalty amount, to increase the environmental compensation, so this comes particularly in the backdrop of Supreme Court taking a dim view of the government's a selective and inadequate action to recover the environmental compensation for burning paddy stubble, right? So despite being this stubble is burnt, the governments have been taking inadequate measures to control stubble burning, and the Supreme Court has taken a serious note of this situation and the inadequate action that has been taken by the government. And because of that reason, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has been thinking over increasing the penalty amount or environmental compensation on the stubble burning. And currently, the Commission for Air Quality Management has adopted a formula which is laid down by the National Green Tribunal, right? So the National Green Tribunal has laid down a formula for imposing environmental compensation or penalty on farmers for stubble burning, right? So who adopted this formula? The formula was adopted by Commission for Air Quality Management, and in fact the Commission for Air Quality Management has the aid of the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region and adjoining areas, imposition, collection and utilization of environmental compensation for stubble burning rules 2023. And in fact, Section 15 of the Commission for Air Quality Management Act 2021 also empowers to collect the environmental compensation. So therefore, collecting or imposing this environmental compensation has the legal backing, and because of that reason, the Commission for Air Quality Management has been thinking about increasing or hiking the environmental compensation from the farmers on stubble burning. And in fact, Delhi has adopted a graded response action plan to fight air pollution. So you can look into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4. For example, stage 1, it indicates moderate to poor quality of air when PM particulate matter is above 2.5, above 61 or so. Based on this, whenever the air pollution levels are moderate to poor, then stage 1 would be implemented, right? So mechanized sweeping, washing roads with water, and even enforcing ban on firecrackers, and in fact increased scrutiny of vehicles for pollution standards. So all these measures would be taken care on stage 1 of the graded response action plan. So stage 2 indicates very poor air. So there will be ban on diesel generators, parking fee to surge by 3 to 4 times, and stop use of coal and firewood estates, and urge people with respiratory or cardiac problems to stay inside. And stage 3, severely polluted air, so increased frequency of road cleaning and shutdown of the brick kilns, restrictions on operation of coal waste power plants in National Capital Region of Delhi. So stage 4, which is considered as emergency, and it is a last stage, and in this stage there will be a ban on entry of trucks except for essential items, and halt construction work and begin odd even road scheme for the private vehicles. So all these measures are being taken as part of the graded response action plan to fight pollution. And in fact, stubble burning is one of the factor which has been contributing to the air pollution in Delhi. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.